In this video, let's cover making a tort bowl, something that could be pretty tricky. We'll talk about strategies on using the shell to hollow this out, but not to hollow down into that neck because you don't want to have to scoop out your spoon into this little hollow area, right? Tort bowls are not hollow past this point. We'll talk about putting some features on here that in this case changes size as it goes from small to large, and we'll talk about generally a way that you can make this and some of the tricky stuff involved. Let's jump into it. Starting from a new part, I'm going to click on my ZX plane, the one that corresponds to the top of the part, and I'll create a circle and another circle, both as reference figures, and we'll give these dimensions. We'll give this a dimension of 4 and a dimension of 0.375. And then I'm going to make some arcs. We'll make an arc here, and we'll make an arc here. Right, so they both end on these reference circles that we've made. And then I'll take this circle center point and we'll go vertical and vertical with the origin. We're going to add a tangent relation between these arcs and also a tangent relation between this arc and this circle, and then an equal relation from here to here, right? So our arcs are equal. Finally, I'll add a construction line from here to there, and I'll add an angle between these to be 30 degrees, right? Any number really that's going to be evenly dividable from 360. And that way we know that we'll have an even pattern going around as we do. So we'll create our figures here, and we're going to mirror across this line, and then I'm going to create a circular pattern of these arcs. And we'll go to, of course, around the center. We're going to give 6 features. And obviously here we're going to have some red and some black. And then the big question is, what do we do with our red? Do we constrain it? Do we not? My workflow on pattern sketch features is, if I go to edit this, the first thing I do is delete the red stuff, make my changes, and then repattern it. And that's probably an overall time saver against having to constrain every single one of these sketched features, right? But it's up to you and your design intent, what you think is best. So let's deactivate the sketch now, and I'm going to create a plane and create it referencing the ZX plane, right? We're going to offset this a distance of 1.5. And we'll activate another sketch on there, and we're going to be a lot more simple about this. I'll give this a dimension of about 1.617 and loft. For my lofted feature, I'll start here and there, and let's say we want both to be tangent. I'll make 1.3, the other one will make 1.2. That looks about like the base that I'm looking for. And then just like that, let's turn this into a surface. So I'm going to go to surfaces here and convert solid to surface. Now this is not solid, and so we can edit other solids independently of it and turn it back into a solid when we want and use it that way, right? In this case, we're kind of running between multiple bodies simply by activating and deactivating them, if you will, by the function of converting them from surfaces and solids. So let's get started again. I'm going to grab my plane and make another plane off of that. This will reference the top edge of our tort bowl, and we'll say 4.5 tall. And from here, we can make a similar sketch. I'm going to go with 2 circles, and we'll give them a diameter, right? We'll give this one a diameter of 7, and we'll give the gap between them a dimension of 0.5. And then I'm going to make an arc here. We're going to go vertical from there to there. And we're going to say tangent, tangent, and tangent. Oh, we're already tangent, of course, because I added those verticals. And then E for equal, just like that. Now, same thing as before. Let's select our construction geometry. And we're going to say 30. And then, as before, actually I'll start with a mirror. We'll mirror these figures to the other side. And then we'll run a circular pattern, right? Pattern these 4 figures around the center. And we want 6 instances. Just like that, we were able to make the top of our dish. And selecting this plane again, I'm going to activate, or project rather, a circle here. Lastly, I'm going to select my base plane again and offset this a distance of 2. Create a sketch, and we're going to project sketch 3, not sketch 4, just like that. And now I can run a loft between these features here. And what I'll do is grab loft, and I'll select, first off, sketch 4. We'll loft that up to sketch 5, and then sketch 3, right? That's the order that we want. And I want that, of course, to look a little bit better than it currently does. And for that, I can say I want this sketch to have a normal, maybe 0.5. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, that looks pretty bull-like, if you ask me. So we're going to say OK to that. So then the big question comes, why did I convert this base to a surface? And we can see why, right? If I go to the solid to surface and I suppress it so that we're all solid, no problem, and then I go to shell, right, we're shelling all the way down. And it's not very realistic. You can't get your spoon in there, right? How would you like to have some tort that you just wouldn't be able to eat? So when you go to inspect this, right, you can't fit a spoon in there. So it doesn't make sense to have that, right? So when we activate our solid to surface and then we go to shell, why now it's only shelling till this little bottom part, right? We're able to split up the body and have our shell do exactly what we want. So that's why we converted this to a surface, so that it didn't count when we went to go shell it. Now, of course, there's a number of ways you can handle this. You can run this as its own loft and then loft out the base, right? You don't have to do it in that kind of order. But if you have a workflow that's a little tricky, or you have to do it in a certain order, this can be a real lifesaver because it can help you control your shell. So that's one approach that you might be able to keep in your back pocket should you ever need. The next thing that we'll want to do is jump on the YZ plane, probably. You know what? I like the YX better for this. And we'll create a sketch. And I'm going to create 3 arcs, right? Maybe an arc over here. And then maybe I can grab 2 tangent arcs. Tangent arc here and there. I'm going to grab a vertical constraint and constrain these points vertical. Same over here. We're going to grab a horizontal constraint, make sure that these points are horizontal. Going back to vertical, I'll grab the center point and make it vertical to the origin. I'll grab an equal and make sure that these arcs have the same radius. And then I'll grab a coincident constraint. And I'll select, say, this edge. And we'll have that, those 2 points lie right on that edge. And then I can say I want this to have a dimension of 1.85. We'll give this point to this point, an overall width of 3. And then what is not fully constrained here, so we'll make sure, and then we'll make sure that we give this a radius of 2.75. I'll make one final line to close my sketch that way, and we will extrude cut just like that. And now we have a wavy opening that I can easily pattern around our center axis here, and we'll give that 6 patterns as well. So now we should have a nice wavy top to our Tort Bowl. And just to finish things off, I can give this a fillet. Now this is actually looking kind of thick. Maybe we want our Tort Bowl to be a little bit thinner. I usually like to think of this shell at maybe 0.125. We'll generate to the last feature, and then I can give this a fillet here. I can fillet this edge. And obviously 0.5 is pretty large. And Alibre actually figured that out, which I think is pretty impressive. But we'll reduce that to 0.05. And we'll want to, you'll notice of course it didn't work, but we'll want to keep selecting some edges, and we're just communicating the continuity of what we want our fillets to be. So if you have a fillet that doesn't quite work, don't give up. Just keep telling Alibre how you want the continuity to be, and I bet something will catch on, especially if you're going through kind of a complex array of cuts like what we have here. And just like that, once you click enough, you should be able to make the continuity and intent clear, and Alibre can run that fillet. I'm going to do the same thing on the outside here. Just like that, we have that fillet. So now we've got a curvy, swoopy bowl, and we'll want to perhaps have our base join back in with our bowl, right? So we'll go to Surface, and we'll stitch our base into a solid. And now, we have a solid bowl. I'll also add a fillet here, just so that our bowl is smooth at the bottom. But let's say that we want our Tort Bowl to be fancier and have some surface features that move along it to give it a sense of style, right? If you're happy with this Tort Bowl, then stop here, you're good. But if you want it to be fancier, let's do some surfacing to make that happen. I'm going to grab these two faces, right? Just stand on them. And we'll go to Surface, and we'll create a surface from the face. And then I'm going to be working on these features, and so I don't want things to get attached to my bowl unnecessarily. So what I'm going to do is, again, convert my solid back into a surface. And that way, in some ways, I just turn that solid off so I can work on other bodies, right? That's the way that I'm thinking about it as I go through this exercise. I'll grab this plane and create a sketch. I'm going to make a fun swooping spline, just like that. Right, so that'll be our circular feature. I'm trying to keep this relatively linear or gradually curving at a spot where we have a really tight curve right there. And that's my one thing that I'm thinking about as I make this spline. So we'll deactivate that, and I'm going to thin extrude. And I can take down my wall thickness a little bit. And of course, I care only about one face of all of these faces. That's going to be the face that's connected with my sketch. Right. So that's going to be this face right here. Every other face I'm going to select on the Surface tab and click on Delete Face. Just like that. We'll say OK. Now you'll remember that I created a surface from the outside face of my bowl right here, and it's time to use it. I'm going to use it as a trimming tool, so I'm going to choose Trim up here, and I'm going to choose my other surface as well, and then I'll choose a region to be removed, which will be this inside surface. And just like that, I've created a surface whose edge follows the outer contour of this bowl and does it quite well. And that's exactly what I want. I'm going to jump into a 3D sketch and just turn this edge into a 3D sketch spline. So we're going to maintain association to source, and with that edge selected, I'm going to say OK. And I can deactivate again. And now you can see that there is some tight curvature here as we go through this. And we'll of course want to make sure that we don't, for lack of better words, kink a sweep as we go through here. So we certainly could just use a sweep feature, but we might be limited on the size due to that curvature. The other thing that we can do, and since I'm done with this surface, by the way, I will delete face here. The other thing that we can do is a loft, which I enjoy quite a lot. We'll go to Model, Plane, and I can start, say, at 100% through, create a plane, and then I'll select my 3D sketch again, and I'll put a plane right on the tightest part of my curvature, probably right there. Just like that, right? About 85% through. I can do another plane by selecting my 3D sketch, and maybe right about there, 42 looks good, and then another plane at the very ending. I'll start with my first plane that I created at 100% through and activate a 2D sketch. Right, maybe I'll give this relatively small size, 0.15, something like that. And then we want to go small on our next plane. So I'm going to not edit, but rather create a sketch on my next plane. And we'll say maybe 0.025, right? It'll go really small. And we can adjust that later if that turns out to be too small. And then we'll go on the third plane that we made and create a sketch on that. Maybe we want that to be relatively big. Maybe we'll say 0.3, right? Something big. And then I'll go on my final plane that I created, activate a sketch on it. And we want it to be small again, right? 0.1. So we're going to have a loft, a centerline loft, that runs through here for features of various sizes, or a feature that changes size as it goes. So I'm going to choose loft over here, and I can choose each of my sketches that I've made. But of course that doesn't make too much sense for a glass to have that. We want it to follow a path. So I'm going to choose my centerline path here and select my 3D sketch for my Explorer. Now we can see here that it doesn't want to cooperate with us, and the number one culprit of that not working, and I can check my status just to be sure, right? Failed to make the B-spline approximation. Our smoking gun is really going to be the size of this. So let's take this down to something like 0.2 and see if we get a different result. Nope. Let's take this down to 0.1. Nope. Next, we'll take this down. 0.075. Oh, and there it worked for us, right? So we go to very small around here, and then larger once again. I'm going to play with this one more time and see if I can get it to be a little bit bigger. Yeah, that looks pretty cool, right? Small to large to kind of small again. Maybe I'll make that ending quite small as well. It's kind of fun to fine-tune the way that your features look, although I won't waste too much time on it now. All right, so we've got this great feature. Let's pattern it. We'll say circular pattern, and we'll choose our center. Just like that, we're able to follow the curvature of the glass all the way around. Or bowl. It's probably more of a bowl. But of course, we're mostly dealing in surfaces, and we want to turn this to a solid and be done. So let's go to surfaces, and we're going to say stitch. And of course, we want to stitch. Oh, I chose this outer surface that I actually don't need anymore. And I often like to delete faces when I'm done with surfaces so I don't run into confusing situations like this. So I can go back to my faces and choose the faces of my surface to delete. And now I can stitch like that. Now a developer rightfully pointed out to me that it is completely unnecessary to use delete face on your surfaces when you're done with them, because they're just acting like references in planes right now. And that's very 100% true. It's extra processing that doesn't need to be done. But from a user standpoint, right, if you have a whole bunch of surfaces, and in my case, that are sometimes taking up the same space as other surfaces, to avoid a confusing situation and to easily review and run through the tree, it can be helpful to delete surfaces just from a user perspective, but there is extra processing and things like that associated. So we're going to stitch what I've selected to solid. And just like that, we've got what turned out to be, I think, a pretty cool Tort glass. Fantastic. I'll hit Control Shift P and K to get more of a fresh look at it. And yeah, I would eat ice cream out of that, particularly if it were made of glass. There's a few finishing touches. I can maybe get rid of this sharp edge down here and give a reasonable loft size. So one thing to note, right, throughout the making of this Tort glass, I have converted things to surface and then back to solids as needed so that I can work with multiple solids independently of other solids of the part, right, because I turn them into surfaces. It's a pretty cool way to work with multiple bodies and be able to edit things independently as needed. One of the downsides is you may lack some of the features here, right, on these part tools. For instance, if I go to add a fillet along here, you can see that we're running into some problems. I can make it a really small fillet, and really that should work, but it doesn't quite. And I think one of the reasons is because for some process, either because we use a centerline loft or we converted to surface and back, some of these things might be affected. Just keep that in mind in your workflow as you move forward. But overall, I'm very happy with this glass. Hope you are too. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.